It is about a long-ago childhood of 6 siblings, who grow up sometimes in heaven, sometimes in hell, always in a lovely landscape, controlled by a savage father and a deaf, distracted, unfriendly mother. When, much later, she published it, it was considered very shocking, but true. Barbara was brought up in the Warwickshire countryside. There was little in the way of education, and she was told that the family were poor. In fact, the house was large, there were servants, though discontented ones, and beautiful gardens. The landscapes of sisters come into The Vet's Daughter, too, but as a dream of someone else's childhood. The heroine, Alice's mother, who was spirited from its heaven into hell. It seems reasonable to identify this setting as Barbara Comyns' own, but the beastliness of the father and the cruelty of the impossible mother are less so, especially as Barbara Comyns' own children do not remember their grandparents as anything of the sort. But it is, I think, true that in all her novels there is a girl seeking sanctuary, and in some of them she finds it, often within another family in which she has been absorbed. In The Vet's Daughter, though, there is no such comfort. The scenery changes. The girl is taken from the countryside to the drab streets of London's Clapham, married off to a monster. In time, she tells her daughter of the fairyland world she had to leave. Alice listens. She listens in the terrible house of her father, the demon vet, where creatures from the natural world are trapped and doomed. There is a sad little monkey who sits in the hearth wringing its hands, as Barbara's mother's fireside monkey is said to have done, and a screeching parrot inhabits the lavatory. The vivisectionist's rep calls weekly for unwanted puppies. Mother and daughter are helpless. The vet is the demon of fairy tale. The sense of fairy tale is never far away in Barbara Comyns. Its childhood power never quite left her. In her late novel, The Juniper Tree, she writes on the flyleaf, "Adapted from a childhood fairy tale of the same name by the Brothers Grimm, which is far too macabre for adult reading." And over the page, "My mother, she killed me. My father, he ate me. My sister, little Marlinchen, gathered my bones, tied them in a silken handkerchief, laid them beneath the juniper tree. Kaiwit, Kaiwit, what a beautiful bird am I." Whatever sort of writer was the author of such books? When I met Barbara Comyns for tea that day in her cheerful house in Twickenham, the sun was pouring in through all its bright windows. There was certainly nothing to suggest the macabre. She was merry and welcoming, and I think she was carrying a sweeping brush. When I wrote a short story about her much later, I felt I had to give her a stave. She was dressed in light colours, and her cheerful paintings, she seemed to think of herself as painter rather than writer, hung all around the hall. I knew that she had been a beauty in her youth, for there is a film starish author photo on the back flap of one of her last, rather dull novels, The House of Dolls, where she looks like Vivian Leigh. The heroines in, I think, all her fiction are obviously, though she never says so, wildly attractive, and one sees that she must have been too. They also seem to be attracted to the most terrible men, of all ages. Her second marriage seems to have put things straight. The delightfully vague-sounding Richard Carr was a senior civil servant who worked in Whitehall. As I was leaving, she said, "I expect you've heard that my husband was a spy. He worked in Whitehall with Kim Philby. Oh, Kim was a delightful man. So funny. Always here playing cards. Neither of us had a notion. When he disappeared, to Moscow, you know, they sacked my husband. They said that either he must have known, and therefore was a traitor, or that he hadn't spotted it, and therefore must have been a fool." Perhaps it was after Philby that the Comyns Carrs went to live in Spain for 18 years. One thinks of her cooking Spanish dishes, like her heroines, she was an excellent cook, among the white almond trees. I feel sure that the terrible juniper tree had withered and died. As it did, I think,